All right, so Jason, how's it going, man?
Good. Are we live?
I think so. Yeah, meeting is now streamed. It's being broadcast now on LinkedIn.
All right. I've heard of that thing. LinkedIn.
And if people are tuning in here, this is actually working. You'll see that we actually have a link here. You can actually use this link and this password. You will actually be joining us via Zoom. And that way, if you have any questions or comments, we can spotlight you and bring you on. For example, a gentleman by the name of Ben just joined us, as you can see.
Oh, yes.
Ben, and he's joining as well. And if Ben has a question, all you have to do, Ben, is raise your hand and we will unmute you and bring you up on the stage. If you're not able to get into the Zoom because of meeting caps, that's not a problem. You can actually just listen in via live stream. So Jason, thanks so much.
Ben is my new best friend. He just wrote up a wonderful write-up about how they just switched over to Basecamp and dumped Slack. So, hey, Ben, good to have you.
I'm always interested in those stories. It's a really good, maybe a good way to start, because in sales, we are always trying to proactively call people out of the blue to get them to switch right away, because as sales professionals, we have a quota. We are tasked with getting people to buy our products, preferably before the end of the quota, so we can get our commission check and our bonus. And Ben, I'm curious to hear from you. Maybe we can kick us off from a real customer's perspective. Did you just wake up one day and decide to fire Slack and hire Basecamp, or was there some events and circumstances that happened over time that eventually caused you to switch over? I'm going to unmute you, Ben, here.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I didn't know if you want me just typing or not, and I didn't even know what was going on. I just popped up, and I thought I'd click in. I thought this was a big thing that I was just going to be listening into, and suddenly I'm on stage.
That's how it goes.
Sorry, say your question again.
Yeah, so as a salespeople, I sell sales training, and so I teach salespeople how to interrupt prospects in the middle of their day. So imagine that you're getting your job done, you're using Slack, and you get a phone call from a salesperson, and they're trying to pitch you Basecamp out of the blue. Salespeople do this all the time in an effort to get meetings and get quota. What I'd like to chat with you about is from a buyer's perspective. Buyers don't buy that way. There's usually some events and circumstances that happen that eventually cause your current tool to no longer get the job done, and you start to look for another tool, in this case, Basecamp. I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey. Sort of take us back to maybe that initial thought of when Slack wasn't really getting the job done for you.
Well, I mean, one of the great things about Basecamp is that I don't know if you have, I don't think you have a sales team.
We don't.
Yeah, and neither do we, by the way. We've never had a sales team at our company either. But we get those kinds of sales sort of calls all the time, trying to push us to something new, or even if we're on something, trying to push us to like a longer contract. We never saw that with Basecamp, but with Basecamp, as I posted in that article, I guess sort of have admired Basecamp from the sidelines for many years. And just for whatever reason, we just never adopted it. There were different people at the company that were adopting different tools for us over time. And gradually we just became like more and more tired of Slack, not really understanding that we were even tired of it. We didn't know. We were sort of poisoned by these messages that were coming all the time. And as I was mentioning that article, somebody just mentioned to me this book, Rework, which I hadn't heard of. I don't know why I hadn't heard of it last year. And I read it, and suddenly it was just like, oh man, I've been admiring Basecamp on the sidelines for many years. It's kind of this passive kind of sale where they just sort of talk about what's great about them, but they're not pushing anything on you. And one day it just kind of like dawns on you that, you know, this might be of interest. So we really like the companies that are not pushing something on you, but rather that are just talking about what the benefits are and not trying to make a sale.
Ben, do you remember what it was that you read, or maybe it was a theme that you kept hearing, a drum that Jason kept beating in his writing that sort of made you think differently about how you were getting your work done?
There were so many things. I mean, there were so many things that we could relate to. First of all, I mean, we're a small company. We're only like, we're less than we were during COVID. We're about 35 people now, and we've grown sort of over the years, like 1 or 2 people a year over the years. And I think we've grown in a similar way to how 37 Signals did over the years. But I think we ran into a lot of those same problems, but we just never ended up solving those problems. So a lot of the problems that Jason and David talk about in their books are all things that we were experiencing, but for whatever reason, we never sort of took a step back to figure like what's actually, how do we solve this? We just thought that's the way work is and life is, and we kind of got like stuck in that for many years. We just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper into like more meetings, less productivity. And there was this, there was once this like really great time in the glory years at our company where we were just loose and free and innovative, and we just got bogged down in all these things, these processes. And there were just so many things in the chapters of rework that were like, that's us. And oh, we never thought about those solutions, or we thought about those, but never thought we could actually like implement them. We just kind of thought we were stuck in our ways. And
it was almost like Jason was sort of joining the conversation in your head in a sense.
A lot. Yeah. Yeah, it really was like, Jason, I can't tell you enough. Like, it's really weird that I'm talking to you. But over the past like 6-7 months, the company has really turned around. It turned around first from reading the book, and then it turned around second from switching to Basecamp. I'm really grateful.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's a wonderful thing to hear, and thank you for that. Your story is interesting because it's very common, which is that as companies grow, they kind of piece together a DIY suite of tools. Like they'll use this for tasks, and this for chat, and this for a calendar, and this for this, and different teams are doing different things. And then at some point, who knows when it is, but there's a point where usually someone higher up in the organization looks at the state of affairs and goes, what? This is a mess. Like, I don't know where to go to find this. And how come I wasn't paying attention to that? And no one showed me this, and I didn't know that. But that was happening over here, and I didn't even think to look over there because I'm over here. And it's just this collection of tools. And then at some point, someone's like, we need to like tighten this up, because the way we were doing this before, it kind of sort of works, but it's not really sustainable. And as we grow, it gets harder and harder. Every additional person you add, every additional tool you add, first of all, it becomes more expensive. Like if you add another employee, you got to onboard them on 4 or 5 different tools, and you got to pay 4 or 5 different prices in 4 or 5 different places. And at some point, someone's like, this is just enough. And the smart companies it doesn't have to be this way, and they start looking for something. So I think that story is a very common story. So you're in very good company, I would say.
Jason, how did you know to write in a way that's going to resonate with Ben? Like, what was the sort of like, how were you able to do that, to get inside his head? Is that because you're sort of living it as well, or?
Well, first of all, I don't know Ben, so I wasn't thinking about Ben when I was writing. I was thinking about us, which is we're a small business, and I tend to write in a way that I'd want to read. So like I think about the things that resonate with us, with me, with our teams, with our company, and I just recognize that like it's not my job to try to convince other people to understand the problems they have. Everyone knows the problems they have. And I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to talk about what works for us. And then what ends up happening is people find you, and they can relate and they can resonate with the problems that you're having and that you're talking about. So I'm actually just writing to us in a sense. And then there are other companies that find us and go, we're us too. We're like you too. And that's how I've always thought about writing these sorts of things. Because I think once you start to imagine an audience, even if you know them really well, you're still imagining them, but you can always write to yourself. I think you know yourself and your struggles and growth. And, we used to be 4 people, now we're 80 people. So like I've seen the progression of challenges that come into play as you grow. And there's different stages in which things get harder and harder and harder. And the answer is it really never gets easier. So the earlier you can take sort of control of or I'd say reduce the proliferation of complications in your business, the better off you're going to be.
Jason, I don't know if this might be a tough question to answer. If you're a salesperson and you're not sort of living in the world that you're living in, so you're talking about these are things that are happening to us, you write about us, and there's other people that can relate to that. If you're a salesperson selling to data scientists and you've never been a data scientist before, how do you start to think about how you can become better at writing messages where other data scientists might be able to say, you know what, I think you kind of get me. I know I'm putting you on the spot here. It's not kind of what you do, but we'd love to get your take on that maybe.
Well, I think first thing is to admit that you probably don't know what you're talking about, like to yourself. Not necessarily like, okay, I don't know anything about this. So if I fake it, I'm going to come off as a fraud. And everyone can sense when someone's talking about something about their industry when the person doesn't know what they're talking about. So it's just so obvious. You can't fake your way out of that. So I think that's the first thing to recognize. You can't fake your way out of that because the other people are smarter than you. They actually know what you're trying to say, but you're not saying it. So I think you want to try to immerse yourself in that world as best you can. You may not be a data scientist, but if you hung out with data scientists somehow, somewhere for a month, you probably absorb some of the fundamentals and be able to at least understand, even if you aren't able to do the work, you might understand them or what they're trying to say. I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not a salesperson, so I don't struggle with this, but what I can tell you from the receiver's point of view is that every time I read something from someone who sends me a cold email, and it's incredibly clear they don't know what they're talking about, and they're talking to you as if they do, it's just an immediate turnoff because it's just disingenuous all the way through. Like it's terrible. So I don't know. You gotta. I think part of this is you want to find a job. Ultimately, this is getting where you sell something that you like or that you know or that you're well steeped in versus trying to get in over your head, selling something you might never understand or don't have the interest or desire to understand.
I got
Hard,
it.
I mean, it's so hard to do.
Yeah. All right, good. We got another question. Bank, is that your name?
Yes. Wow,
Hey,
I'm absolutely delighted, Josh. I came across your content like a week and a half ago because I'm just intrigued on sales. I'm a founder. It's been so incredibly hard to sell our offering, but we've built something that people want. And the way I know is that we're piloting with one location now and multiple events. And when they use it, they're like, I wish I took a call with you a year ago. But I think there's message market fit problem. And I've just been taking in all your content and I'm like, I still need help. So I'm here today to ask maybe one or two questions. And I'm thankful that you put this together. I was literally reading your content and the live popped up because I was composing an email and I was looking at the list that you put together, like don't do, say this and stuff like that. So quickly, what my startup does, I'm the founder of a company called Jump the Line. We are a guest management platform for venues, event organizers, and social places. And we offer things like ticketing, ticket validation. And for venues that have long lines, through our app, people can skip those lines on demand. Customers want it. They're like, why aren't you everywhere? Well, every time we try and go talk to the club owners, I think in the beginning, they hear our name and they're like, I love my lines. I want it to be like 10 blocks. And so I had to go learn about the jobs to be done framework. And I was like, what work do they really want to do? And I was like, they want to keep their lines, but they want to keep people coming back. And so it's been difficult to like word it to where it hits them. So one of the things I've been trying since I found your content is like, it looks like find something unique about their venue, build this technology that helps filter your lines for potential loyal customers to keep them coming back. And that kind of worked last week. And we're getting this meeting with like a huge hospitality group. And now it's like, I've been trying it again. And it seems like that hasn't hit with like other businesses. So I'm like, there's still a message market fit problem.
Okay, let's back up for a second. First off, hat tip to you for getting some traction. It's not easy to build something from scratch and to get the attention of people that are already getting the job done and to help them sort of lean forward and learn more about you. And it's even harder for them to actually adopt something because, as you know from jobs, there's all this anxiety of switching and habit of the present. So I know it may feel like you don't have what you're calling market message fit. Neither did Jason probably when he first got started, but he started with one or two people and it sort of got there. So don't get so down on yourself that you have to have everybody adopting your thing the first time you reach out to them. So that's sort of thing number one. I do want to understand a little bit about the jobs first before we kind of get going. Can you give me the name of a specific venue that you're talking about, just so I can make it a little bit more crispy in my mind, that might use this? Is this like someone that's like doing a concert, or is it like a baseball game venue, like the Cubs?
Yes, so typically large crowded areas like a nightclub, a restaurant that, brunch restaurants. Typically, I stay in the Bay Area, San Francisco. And so concerts that have long lines and they just like have crowd. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to brunch in San Francisco. There's a great place I like out there called Dottie's. It always has a long line out the door. And how are they currently solving for that today without you?
They just keep people waiting.
Okay. Now I wait for Dottie's for an hour and a half because the sourdough French pancakes at that place are unbelievable. Is it a problem? I'm certainly not going to be deterred. I'm certainly going to wait in the line if I want to eat at Dottie's, and I'm certainly going to come back because I love Dottie's. What's the problem when people wait in line from the person that you're prospecting's perspective?
So for the restaurants, they don't care. They feel like they're serving something great. People probably wait. But on the customer end, what we found is that one, they came out already and they want to eat at this place, and they cannot like go back and disrupt their plan because they've already set their mind on doing that. However, there's this pain and annoyance that they feel like, I want this thing and I'm all of a sudden waiting like a couple of hours. And for them, they think when they say 1 hour, it's not going to be up to that 1 hour. And then they end up waiting 1 hour and time is invested. They have to keep waiting until they get the service.
Okay, but what is that? What is it? I understand that, but you're not selling to those people. You're selling to the owner of Dottie's.
Yes.
Dottie's only has so much capacity. I've been to that restaurant a bunch of times. I'm bringing it up because they have 20 tables.
Yes.
You can only seat 20 people at a time. If you want to eat at Dottie's, you got to wait 2 hours, even if you get there at 7 a.m. So from the owner's perspective of Dottie's, what's the problem?
So the problem is why they actually got to the point where people wait in the first place is that the history of brunch places, for example, is when they were doing reservations, there was a lot of no-shows and they already have low margins that they increase the price of all of this stuff. And so to make people serious, they just say, come, like if you're serious about dining with us, like just come to the place. So it's kind of like to build that validation of like, we're making this good food. We don't want to invest time if people are not going to show up. So people just have to show up to get the service, and they hold the line sometimes because it makes it look good for them.
Is this, let me ask you, because we haven't really talked about the product. Is this essentially like Clear at the airport? You pay ahead and you jump the line, basically.
Yeah, so it's a bit impulsive. So
Okay.
our model with restaurants is we pay them upfront. So we prepay them for like maybe 1 or 2 tables upfront.
Yeah.
And so when people show up, they say, hey, it's 45 minutes wait. However, if you want to get seated right away, you can do it on this app. And so people pay that premium. And because we've prepaid them for that table, you can now, get seated right away. So it's kind of play, but more impulsive.
Got it. And I'm just curious, are you getting pushback from restaurants because they don't want to sell you 2 tables ahead of time at a reduced price? Because my guess is that you're probably not paying maybe what someone might sit down and pay, or are you? How does that, I'm just curious about the mechanics there.
So for them, where we've gone to places is like, no, we just don't want to do this. We're very traditional. We don't use waitlisting system. We don't use anything. And for some people, they just like open the email and just never like respond. So it's like we're not even getting any kind of engagement with them. And for places like restaurants, they kind of gate the system where like you go there and say, oh, can I talk to the owner? They're like, oh, the owner is not here. So it's like, how do you even talk to like the business owner when the access is already gated? And so when you try by email, I think because I'm not shedding the light on the problem that they're seeing, it's just going to red and they're not responding.
I'm not here. I think that's a good point. I'm not hearing the problem, and maybe I'm thinking about Dottie's wrong because Dottie's doesn't have a problem with empty tables. Dottie's has 20 tables, they fill them up. There's more people than they could serve, and then when they run out of stuff, they close the restaurant. So
Yes.
like I'm trying to understand what the problem is. I'm still kind of grappling with that a little bit. Maybe
so-
Dottie's isn't a good example, but it seems
Yeah.
like it might be.
What's interesting about this is that I totally see the desire for someone who's like, I want to go to this place, but there's a line. I want to jump that line, and I'm willing to pay, I don't know, $25 just to get in the place, right? So I get that. And
Yeah.
there's a really wonderful, on the consumer side, you can see why, like, you can imagine in any given moment, there's plenty of people who'd want to do that.
Yes.
The trick is getting the restaurant owner or whoever makes the decision there to allow their customers to want to do that. And so you've got like, it's very clear on the customer side why that would be beneficial to a few people who don't mind spending $25. But on the business side, if the business is already going to fill the tables, and they probably already have a little VIP list. They someone who's a regular, they might be able to come in and get ahead of the line anyway. You got to figure out a way, and maybe you do have this pitch down, I don't know. But for the restaurant owner to go, yeah, this is a benefit to me, which is kind of what Josh is saying. Like, I see the benefit to the customer, but what is the benefit to the restaurant owner allowing someone to jump the line? Also, will it potentially frustrate everyone else who's waiting in line? And they'll be like, F this. I've been waiting an hour and a half, and this guy, I mean, I don't know how people would know that would be
Yes.
happening, but
Thank you.
so I kind of
Yes,
wonder about that.
Josh,
Take a look at what
thank you.
Disney, take a look at what Disney does.
Yes.
So Disney has a concept of a fast pass. What's in it for Disney is what? What's in it for Disney is instead of getting $70 a ticket, they get $400 a ticket, because anyone that has kids, it's worth probably 5 times as much as that, not to have to wait in the Florida sunshine in 98 degrees for 2 hours to go ride, a Harry Potter ride. Not to mention when you're in the line, I got to go buy my kid $10, $15 sodas or Slurpees, right?
Yes.
So it's an extra revenue stream for them. Maybe there's a way to approach the business owner in the same way and say, hey, I can increase your average revenue price per table, because in addition to them buying whatever they're going to do at the restaurant, you're also going to get a $200 fee for people that want to skip the line, and you're going to queue them up first. I mean, that might be interesting, Jason. I don't know.
Yeah, well, here's another way to think about it. And we're just spitballing here, right? I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
But one way to think about it could be anyone who jumps the line has to pay a 10% premium on their bill. So then the restaurant is not just making $80 like they would normally make. Now they're making 88. And so now it's incentivized for the restaurant to go, well, at least 2 covers, I can make an extra 10% or 15% or 20%. And then the customer's like, I don't care because I just want to eat here. So if the pancakes are $14 instead of 12, it doesn't matter to me. The restaurant owner gets more money than they normally would have gotten, and sort of everyone maybe wins in that case. I don't know how you're set up, but that could be another way to think about it.
Ben, is that helpful for you?
I crave your indulgence. So, Josh, I recognize I didn't answer your question.
And then we're going to move on because there's other people waiting too. So
Okay.
let's take this and we can move on.
Thanks. Hit me up on LinkedIn in the messenger and we'll continue.
All right.
All right. I'm going to go remove him. And it looks like we got someone, Abdul. I'm going to unmute you here and have you join us here.
Sure. I believe Ben had the question before. If you want to go through him first.
Ben's already come up. We'll go back to Ben.
Abdul, since
Sure,
you
sure.
paid to skip the line, Abdul, since you just paid banks, we're going to have you go first. So
Sure, no worries. Thank you very much for this
Cha-ching.
session. I believe I contacted. I've seen one of the posts from Jason for the team of 2, right?
Yes.
And from your book, there was a teams of 3, and then you changed it to teams of 2. So I'm the VP of HR at a company in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. It's a production company. We're implementing Basecamp, philosophy. Our major book to read is Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work and Rework, the first thing, right, for every employee. However, my main issue is that I believe we're using Basecamp wrong, in that we have 20 plus people in every project. Everyone's included in everything. Everyone inputs, whatever they think they want to add or discuss. So sometimes projects, instead of taking 6 weeks, like you mentioned, it might take months, or it piles up on the line more than it kind of breaks down. So my question is, is it only 2 people in a project? And those 2 people, do they only handle 1 project at a time, or do they have 10 projects to handle at a time? How does it work?
Yeah, great question. So a couple different things. At Basecamp, we also often have many people on a project, but they're sort of observers. They're kind of lurking because they're curious. But the project is defined. There's 2 people who are working on the project. And so in Basecamp, when you add people to a project, you can make them working on or just following. And working on means they had their actual faces at the top of the project, and everyone else is sort of, you know, there, but they're not on there. So that way you can say, these are the people who are on the project. They're the ones who make the decisions. And if other people are throwing in ideas, it's up to the 2 people to sort of cordon them off and decide what they're going to do. So you have to give them some autonomy. People can share feedback, but just because someone threw something in the pile does not mean that they have to consider it or do it. And in fact, before the project begins, it should be pretty tight. The scope should be pretty tight. The concept should be pretty tight. So it's pretty clear what they're about to do. And there shouldn't be a whole bunch of people throwing in ideas as you go. I mean, people can submit an idea if there's a problem, if there's something that the team's working on and someone gets stuck, and they can then solicit feedback, but they shouldn't be throwing in ideas because the ideas have already sort of been defined to some degree, right? Now this takes practice because, you know, the more people you have involved with something, the more more opportunity there is for people just to throw in their 2 cents. But I would reiterate, as maybe the owner of the business or whatever, like, hey, these 2 people are working on this project. It's up to them to decide. We've sort of defined what this thing's going to be. And if you have some thoughts, you can share them if you wish, but I wouldn't expect them to all be considered because they're already working on this other thing. The other thing is that to your other thing, those 2 people who are working on that one project are only assigned to that one project at a given time. So they have no other responsibilities at all. If you start assigning people to multiple projects at the same time, or pull them off this to work on that, then things never get done. So you have to, one core thing of Shape Up is to make sure that people are dedicated to a specific piece of work for a specific period of time. And that's the only responsibility they have unless there's an emergency or something like that where they need to deal with that.
Okay, so these are the only projects they're working on for the full 6 weeks. If they finish sooner, they can take another projects.
Well, it depends. So it depends. Not every project should take 6 weeks. So some projects can take 4 days, some can take 2 weeks, some can take 3 weeks, but you define that up front. You say, what is the appetite? What is our appetite for this project? Not how long do we think it's going to take, because the answer is it'll take as long as we allow it to take. That's how projects go. But if we're saying we're only willing to spend 2 weeks on this or 3 weeks on this or 4 days on this, that's the appetite, and that's all the project gets.
Jason, how do you know what your appetite is? How do you know what your appetite is, though? How do you know what that is for, let's say, your example? Like, you do this all the time, right? I have an 8-week appetite for this thing, or a 4-week. Is it a gut feel, or?
It's kind of like, what is this thing and how important do we think it is to us, and how much are we willing to spend on it? I mean, the way we think about it is, let's say you're going to go to Vegas. And you're going to bring a certain amount of money with you, and you go, I'm going to go to Vegas, and this is my entertainment money. And if I lose it, I'm out. I'm not going back to the ATM. I'm comfortable losing $500 over 4 days in Vegas. And that's it. It's the same thing with projects. Like, I'm comfortable spending 3 weeks of company time on this project. We don't go back to the well and get another 3 weeks, or go back to the well and get another 3 weeks and try to make up for the 3 weeks we spent. It's like, this is what we think this thing is worth. So it's a bit of a judgment call. It's, you know, could be some business metrics in there, but the fundamental thing is, before the project begins, you define how much time you're willing to give it. And with a maximum of 6 weeks. But so Abdul, to your point, sometimes a given team of 2 will be assigned 3 projects in 6 weeks, 3 2-week projects, or they might be assigned 2 projects, 1 4-week and 1 2-week. Or they might be assigned 2 projects that only go for about 4 weeks, and they have an extra 2 weeks of sort of freelance time to pick off their own mini things. But you've got to define the stuff up front. And that's the other thing you can always remind people, like, hey, we only have 2 weeks. So like, if people are throwing in all these ideas, like, we're not going to get this done. We only have 2 weeks. So I think the time box is a really, really helpful way to deal with this. And the other thing I would say lastly is if people keep interrupting the project's progress, you can let them know, like, we are not going to get this done if you keep doing that. So focus on your own stuff. Like, it's okay to focus on your own stuff. There's oftentimes internally, there'll be a discussion that's going on, and too many people will jump in because people do. And I'll just go like, okay, moving on. We got to get back to work. And I'll just say that and just kind of shut it down. And it's not like a harsh thing. It's just like, this is going to go on forever and it's not really going to get us anywhere. So let's get back to work.
Abdul,
quick question.
a little bit?
Yes, so Shape Up, the book, is that only for technical teams, or is it for any team that we can act on it?
There's a lot of things in there that work for pretty much any team. And most of our company runs on Shape Up principles, even if they're in HR or they're in on operations or customer
Okay, great.
service. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good luck. You can email me if you have any follow-ups. Just jason@37signals.com. I'm happy to help.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks.
Jason, for the people that are just tuning in and they're not familiar with Shape Up, could you just give a little color on what that is?
Sure. Shape Up. So it's if you go to basecamp.com/shape up, I'll put it in the chat. Does this show up in the streaming thing too? I don't know how this Zoom.
You're asking me?
Anyway, that's in the chat. Maybe it'll show up somewhere. Shape Up is our methodology for how we get work done at 37 Signals. It's something we invented over the past 20 some odd years of perfecting and trying things and figuring out how to actually make a lot of progress in a short period of time with a very small team. And it's our approach to developing products primarily.
Ben is back. Ben, you have a question for Jason. If you're just joining us on LinkedIn Live, you can join us via Zoom right now. The link is right there below my chin. Just go to that link and type in that password. Then you can simply raise your hand and we'll call you up on the stage. Ben, you have a question for Jason or I?
Yeah, I'll be quick because I was on earlier, but actually Abdul led me to think of a second question. I hope you don't mind. There'll be two quick ones in here. So one, yeah, you mentioned that you've moved to sort of from 3 people to 2 people teams. So does that mean like all of your programmers are both full front end and back end developers? Like we've got a lot of projects that require front end development and back end development. We've got Ruby on Rails developers and then like React developers and then a designer, and don't really see how I can do that unless we sort of change up our staff. That was one question that just sort of
Let me address that one first.
Okay.
So you have who you have. And so if in your case, it might be 3 people per team instead of 2. At 37 Signals, here's how it breaks down. We have on every project, there's 1 programmer and 1 designer. The designer handles all the visual design, the copywriting in the UI, and also HTML and CSS and some JavaScript. So they handle all the front end work, design and implementation. The programmer handles all the back end work. All the models, the controllers, the making the thing work, the database calls, the structural infrastructure that needs to happen to make the feature work. So they interface and work side by side on things. But the split basically is if the customer sees it and interacts with it visually, it's the designer's job. Everything else to make the system actually work with the computers and the back-end job, that's a programmer's job. Now, in some cases, in most companies, the split's a little bit different. There's a programmer, there's a designer, and then a front-end engineer or something like that. Our designers are also front-end engineers, so we hire that way. But if you don't hire that way, you work with who you have, and you might have a 3-person team, let's say.
All right. Well, we've got our head of product design on here. She's going to have to learn how to front-end code now after having heard your response. Okay. So, but my actual question was just around meetings, because one of the only things that sort of has kept us like not actually stop paying for Slack yet, when we moved to Basecamp, was one tool that they have on there, which is Huddle, which is just a really quick way to have an audio conversation. And you've talked a lot about, just not even having video conversations, for example, just picking up the phone and having a call like that. So I was curious, when you do have those calls, are you with your staff, with somebody, a one-on-one, are you always picking up the phone, or do you have some kind of other tool other than something like Huddle on Slack to just make a real quick audio call to just answer something that can't always be done so quick in writing?
Sure. So
Curious
since
what
our
you
teams are 2 people, typically, like you just pick up the phone if you need to and just make a phone call, or pop a Zoom link in is typically what we'll do. If there's screen sharing is involved or something like that, we tend to try to stay away from anything other than text as much as we possibly can, because I think what ends up happening is you begin to lean on things that become conversations that don't need to be, and there's very few things as a short call. That 3-minute call turns into a 10-minute call, turns into a 15-minute call. Not always, but oftentimes. So We just lean on, if you need to talk audio, phone is great for that. We all have our phone numbers and we can make a quick call. Or we just pop in a Zoom link and just have a quick conversation that way. So that's how we do it. I've always liked the idea. And in fact, way back when, years and years ago, when Campfire was a separate product, so Campfire is the chat that's built into Basecamp, there used to be a conference call feature in it where you just click a link and it would just pop in a conference call URL and a phone number. And so everyone could call in and have a quick conference call. So I do like the idea of quick audio chats, and it might be something we end up adding to Basecamp at some point. But for now, since our teams are small, like a phone call just works just fine. Yeah.
I think this gets to an interesting point. I want to press you on a little bit, Jason. You're thinking about this design in terms of how you guys are using it. But I'm hearing from Ben, there's other people using it in a different way that maybe have more teams. Are you only kind of focused on what you guys use, or do you listen to feedback like Ben and say, hey, we're not just developing this for us, there's these other use cases for these other teams, and maybe we should consider this even though we might not use it? Or is it the latter, the former, which is if we're not going to use it, we're not going to build it?
Hang on a second, my son's at the door. One second.
So if you're just joining us, I am with Jason Fried, founder and CEO of Basecamp. My name is Josh Braun. We're talking about sales, marketing, product development, and how to work. The unique thing about this format is that you can raise your hand and be called up on stage. Jason, the question I posed to you is...
I heard it. Yeah, so we build all sorts of things for all sorts of people. But there's, any given time, there's literally 1,000 things everybody wants. So this is a matter of understanding the customer base as a whole, mixing it with our own priorities internally, and also what we're capable of doing and what makes sense now. And there's a million other things that we're thinking about doing. And so you kind of like it's just this constant orbit of things that you could do. There's never a shortage of ideas. So that's just kind of how it all comes together. Like, this is a great idea. I like this quick audio chat idea. There's another 100 great ideas that we need to consider, that we're already considering, that we're already working on. So everything has to sort of compete for itself, for attention, essentially. And there's just a limited number of, teams and space, and everyone who builds products kind of gets that. But
so Ben, you can work with Banks. Banks is going to get you a ticket to pay extra to get your feature to the front of the line in Basecamp. All right, thanks, Ben. We're going to put you back down there, and we're going to go to Matt Brown here. Matt, I'm going to bring you up on stage here. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for bringing me on stage. Jason, big fan. I work in data, specifically on the analytics side. And I know you kind of said in the past that you're not super metrics heavy, don't have goals at your company. So just curious kind of what just how you use data within Basecamp. General open-ended question.
Yeah, sure. So data is primarily used to analyze certain things that are performance oriented. There's on the operations side, for example, like how are our servers running? What is the average response time? There's that kind of stuff. We also use data sometimes to analyze customer service inquiries and to figure out how we should hire, what time zones we need to cover, some of that kind of stuff. We often will use data to analyze a marketing experiment. Did this work? What did this lead to? How many people click through? That kind of stuff. But we're not a primarily data-driven company in terms of product development. We're primarily gut-driven and sort of field-driven, based on our own needs, based on what we're hearing from customers, and you hear. It's very clear if you pay attention, like you hear and kind of what people want. But for example, we don't launch a feature and then measure it. Did anyone use this? It's not worth the time. Feature exists, we move on.
Why not? Why don't you do that? Why?
Because because what are we going to do about it? I'm not going to go back and change old decisions. Like, the feature exists, there it is. And we move on to the next thing. We move on to the next thing. We move on to the next thing. We're not going to get it 100% right all the time, but to stop every time and analyze and post-mortem and all this stuff and look at the data and sometimes you don't even know what it means. So 23% of the people use this. Is that good or bad? I don't know. 18%. What if it was 19%? What if it was 26%? There's a lot of these debates that happen when you start looking at numbers, and it's like, well, it exists. Let's move on. So we're not obsessing about that sort of thing. We're not trying to hit targets, but we do use data when we need to measure something that matters in a way that we can make an adjustment. So for example, is it worth spending this kind of money on this campaign again? Are server response times too slow or something like that? We can speed that up. You know, we can watch certain trends over time, things that we can measure repeatedly over time and sort of pick up on trends and see, are we doing better? Are we doing worse? Some of that stuff. So it exists, but we don't look to it as a primary source of insight into what to do next. If that's
Got it. Yeah. I mean, and I was curious where, if you do have like a specialized data team within your company, are they like a centralized team? Like I imagine there's, you know,
we have one
obviously
person.
Okay, got
We
it.
have one person on data, and then we have someone who's on finance, and we have some other people who, and our operations team looks at their own data, and we have some dashboards and all that kind of stuff is available to different people. But we have one person who is a data scientist / data analyst. But what we'd like to do is spread that again more broadly. So there's just tooling and there's things people can look at if they need to get an answer versus having to have a bottleneck of one person who is the only person who can look stuff up.
Right. I like that approach. Thank you.
I want a follow-up question for Matt, if I can keep him on the stage. He's mentioned goals. What about revenue goals? Like, do you have a revenue goal that you are now starting to sort of spend against?
Are you asking us or Matt?
I'm asking you, Jason.
Oh, no. So we're not goal driven in that way. We don't have revenue goals. We don't have profit goals other than like we want to be profitable, and we'd like to have healthy margins, which is a range. It's a broad feeling of what we're comfortable with. It's not like we need to have 61% margins, and if we go down to 60, well, something's wrong. It's like, I don't like working that way. That's not how I want to be. It's not how I think things should be. It's like, we know what healthy margins are. We know if we're happy with the margins. We know if we're happy with you just kind of know, these things. So that's kind of how we do it. We just do the best job that we can, and having a goal to hit should not make us work harder or do better. We should be doing the best we can anyway. That's what we're here to do. And I don't like artificial targets. I don't like man-made targets where we just make up something. Let's hit this number because it's a nice round number. If we need to hit a number because we need to hit a number because literally the company will be out of business if we don't hit the number, different story. But that's not how we run the business.
All right, Matt, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to put you back to there. And we're going to go to Chris now. Chris, want to add you? Chris, you're on with Jason and Josh.
Great, thanks. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear you. Perfect.
Great. So Jason, I know you guys are notorious for hiring when it hurts, always having that mantra as you've grown the business. And I've noticed, you have a director of marketing now, you have a general counsel, you have a recruiter, which is a little bit of a surprising because you guys don't hire that often. So I'm wondering what were the pain points that you were experiencing that led to those decisions to actually hire people for those full-time positions?
Yeah. So we don't have a general counsel anymore. So that was a job that we had for a year, and it wasn't actually a full-time job, it turned out.
Gotcha.
So that just didn't work out. So they're not here anymore. A recruiter, we decided last year to really hire a bunch more people so we could do more than one thing at a time. So historically, we've had multiple products, but we've only been able to work on one of them at a time. Just Basecamp for a while. Whilst we're working on Basecamp, we can't work on Hey. Once we're working on Hey, we can't work on Basecamp, but we decided we wanted to be a more capable company. And so that meant hiring more product teams, hiring some more people in customer service, hiring some more people in a few different areas. And we had one person who's historically been handling all the applications we get, but her job, that's just part of her job. There's a lot of other things that she does as well. She's head of people ops, she does some other things. And it was pretty overwhelming for her and we're fortunate in that whenever we have a job opening, there's hundreds to sometimes 1,000 or more applications that come in. So it became a really big chore for one person to do that part-time whenever we wanted to hire 3 or 4 positions at a time. It was just completely overwhelming. So we had to find someone who could help us primarily focus on that thing. Now that we're not hiring as much anymore, kind of staffed up the business. The recruiter is now helping out with some HR stuff because we only had one person on HR before. So it's a kind of a nice adjustment there that we made. And so we've sort of adjusted with our needs. But basically it was to allow us to build a more capable company. And now we're releasing great updates for Basecamp and great updates for Hey simultaneously every 6 weeks, making both products better at the same time. And we're working on a new product right now and maybe another new product soon. So we're able to do more of that at once. We couldn't have done that when we were a much smaller business. So that was sort of the decision we made. That's, we hired for that. But again, like if a certain position doesn't make sense anymore, then that position won't be around anymore. And that's kind of what happened with general counsel. She did a wonderful job. It's just that it wasn't a full-time job for our needs.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, thanks so much, Chris. We're gonna go to next person, which is Kevin. I ask you to unmute here, Kevin, and we're gonna pull you up on the stage. Hey, Kevin, you're on with Jason and Josh.
Hey, Josh, thanks so much. You guys can hear me all right?
Yep.
Good. Well, hey, thanks so much. First of all, I just want to say that I didn't plant Chris before to answer this question since it's kind of related. This is something I've wanted to ask Jason for a while, and I'm really glad that there's this worlds colliding between Jason and Josh right now. But you mentioned earlier, Jason, that you don't currently have any sales team at Basecamp, and I was curious when you think that roadblock would be, or what would make you say, you know what, hey, I think this would make sense now.
Yeah, we don't have salespeople. We've never had them and almost certainly never will. And the main reason why is because our business is primarily targeted at really small businesses. So the majority of our customers, there are fewer than 50 people in the company. In many cases, fewer than 20. In many cases, fewer than 10, right? These are small companies. And our price structure is, we're not going after enterprise sales. We're not trying to land 700 seats because you couldn't even pay us. We have a $15 a month per user, or $2.99 is an unlimited number of users. So like the max anyone could really pay us is $2.99. So there's just not a lot of room there, frankly, for commission and for all the expenses that are required to land a potential client at $299. We also don't lock people in. So like, if someone quits after a month, like we can't do that. So we're not incentivized that way. I think if you're trying to land big companies, enterprise companies, big accounts, long-term accounts, there's definitely a lot of room there. And it's more of a hand-holding sales process kind of thing with a long lead time. But our stuff is self-service, very, very affordable, and sales just doesn't really have room here, frankly.
Let me piggyback off on what Kevin's saying, just to see, Jason, if this shifts your thinking any. So I would imagine there's a way for you to know if there's pockets of people using Basecamp at Comcast or a bigger company or Verizon.
There are.
And what if there was a sales function that allowed you to sort of spider into those companies at a broader level and change your pricing structure so that it would make sense? You're already sort of in the company. In sales, we call this landing and expanding. Any appetite for that? Why or why not?
It happens naturally. So it either happens naturally or it doesn't. I'm not interested in trying to make sales. It's just not what we want to do. And also, I don't really want big customers. I don't want.
Why don't you want big customers?
I don't want big customers because big customers typically, if you have enough big customers who pay you an outsized amount compared to everybody else, you end up working for them. You're basically now a consulting company working for a handful of big, huge accounts. That's not how we want to do it. We want to have uniform payment, uniform prices, essentially, roughly, for our entire customer base. That if you were to pick a random 20% of our customers and hit cancel, we wouldn't want this to happen. But let's say you hit cancel on their accounts, we would be okay. We would not be terrified that the four of that 20%, four accounts represented 70% of our income or revenue or something like that. I don't want to go down that road. We don't want that to happen. Basecamp does spread within large companies with small teams across large companies, but I don't want a concerted effort to try to land a gig with 300 seats at a certain company. It just doesn't make sense for us, especially when we have a cap on the amount you can pay us. Like $2.99 is the most we'll take right now, and you can have unlimited seats. So
Kevin, there is no job for us at Basecamp. It doesn't seem like at this particular moment.
Well, I've been subscribed to the emails for a while, believe me.
Basecamp, So Josh has been the only salesperson who's ever.
I lasted like 7 months, so it's not good. If you're thinking about applying, do not do this.
And by the way, there's an alternative
universe.
universe.
Changed his mind when he hired me. He's like, you know what? If that's what salespeople are, I don't want to do any of this.
There's an alternative universe where perhaps that would have been a model for us. We could have gone down that road, but we're not structured that way. We don't want to be that way. We don't need to be that way. We actually think there's more strength in uniform numbers than there is in trying to land the big account that pays you a lot that you're now on the hook for because you're afraid to lose them. I think one of the most important principles in business is you should never have a customer that you can't afford to lose. And I think that a lot of companies get stuck landing massive accounts that they cannot afford to lose. And then, people who've worked at those companies know what that looks like. I don't want to be in that position.
Thanks, Kevin.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
All right, we got another one here. Next in line was Bo. I'm going to ask Bo to unmute here, and Bo going to come on the stage with us. Hey, Bo. Oh, are you there? Let's see. Did I get Bo right? Let's see. Bo.
I just went on mute. I don't know if it's.
Oh, there you go. Bo, are you, let's see. Bo, where's Bo? Let's see if I can find Bo. There you are, Bo. Okay, Bo, I'm going to put you here. Hey, Bo, how's it going with you? You're on the line with Josh and Jason.
Yeah, thank you. The 2 companies ago, I worked for a company whose first enterprise customer was Walmart. And we dealt with that exact same phenomenon you're talking about, where I've heard the rule of don't have a customer be more than 7% or something like that. And they were much larger than that. And it was risky. In response, I've been trying to build a company that has service revenue early, and we're automating the service that we're providing, and that's building an enterprise product. My question was around when we do design reviews for people building buildings. So we pull in their plans, we've built a platform to look at their projects in a unique way, and we're able to sell that as a service today. So we've looked at 200 large projects in the last 2 years. It's allowed us to almost be cash flow positive from the very beginning. And my question's around, like, when do you know your internal tool's good enough to sell? And then how to run kind of that, in Shapehup, we were reading it as like R&D mode, because that kind of maps to what we're doing, but we're using it internally. And then when is it ready to be an external tool? The other thing that I've been trying to do, there's a list of contractors, the ENR 500 list, and we've just not gone after the top of the list for that kind of same phenomenon you're talking about. They're large accounts, they get complicated to navigate once we're inside. A lot of different buyers, they can kick the tires, and it's really good for us. $50,000 to them isn't much, so they can kick the tires for $50,000. We spend a lot of time, and then it doesn't go to repeat work. And so I had a lot of thoughts there, but my main question is kind of like knowing the difference between when your thing's ready for external use versus internal use.
Yeah. I'll start with this. Maybe Josh, I don't know if you want to chime in on some thoughts, but the first question I would have is, did you build it for yourselves internally, or did you build it with the intention for it to become a public product?
The second one. Yeah, that was
okay.
The plan was to build it. And I've been a product manager building design systems previous to this. So that was the intent. It was kind of a good way to dog food it and make money from the very beginning.
Yeah. I mean, so there's no scientific answer to this. Obviously, it really is a feeling. The way we've always thought about it is it's ready for prime time when it's ready for us. Like, is there stuff in there that you feel like it can't do or isn't quite ready to do? Like, and if those things are really, really important things, I would just get those things ready. I mean, there's kind of no other way to know than to put it on the market. But you need to feel like, this thing is working without a lot of hand-holding, without a lot of internal knowledge that like only we would know as a company. And if we put this out on the market, no one else would understand how to use this because they need to know X, Y, and Z, and they won't. So you just got to kind of have a feel for like, is it ready? One of the bigger, I know this is like it's a very non-satisfying answer, but the only way to know is to put it on the market, because you will forever. If you're sort of if your bar is it needs to be perfect, like you're never going to get on the market, and then you'll never have a chance because the company won't exist. So it's like the best way to find out if something's ready is to let it meet the market, and then be willing and ready to adjust rapidly if things aren't quite right. And there's nothing that speeds up your development than actual real people trying to sign up for this thing and use the thing for real. Like, you will move so much faster once actual customers have this in their hands. I wouldn't say fast. You'll know, I shouldn't say you'll move faster. You will know faster what works and what doesn't, compared to right now. You're like, is it ready? You will know if it's ready so fast once people start using it. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know how long you've been working on it and what you think is missing and the whole thing, but probably it needs to do less than you think.
Right.
And the things it needs to do should just be done really well. And then you can leave a lot of things out that you can get to later. You don't need to
Jason,
launch with every possible idea you've ever had for version 1. Version
Can you
1 should be a real tight version 1, and then you can add more as you go.
Can you talk to Bo a little bit about the idea of epicenter? I think that'll be relevant here.
Yeah, well, I mean, the epicenter, one way to think about the way we approach development of a new feature or a new product is to start at, like, you know, what is the epicenter? What is the absolute core of this thing? What does it need to do? And the example we've given, I think in Rework, or no, in maybe Getting Real, our first book on this, was the hot dog stand. So if you're gonna open a hot dog stand and like put it on the corner on the street so customers can come by, like, what does it need to have? Well, if you're a real hot dog aficionado, you might think it needs relish and celery salt and pickles and hot peppers and all the things. But actually, you can open a hot dog stand with just a hot dog. Like, a hot dog is the hot dog stand. If you don't have the hot dog, nothing else matters. You can have the bun, the pickles, the peppers, the thing, the tomatoes, the whole thing, the onions. But if you don't have the hot dog, it's not a hot dog stand. So you're figuring out, like, what is the epicenter of the thing you're offering? Does it do that really well? Can it do what it needs to do enough right now as it is? Versus having all the toppings ready to go, you know? So that's kind of one way to think about it. And I can't answer that. You're the only one who can answer that. But does the product do enough of what it needs to do to get it out there? And then know you're going to iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate and iterate in you know, live in public.
And there's always going to be people that are going to just want the hot dog.
Yeah.
That are not going to care about the toppings. So find a subset of buyers that are those buyers.
The other thing, though, is
people always rush through is, I got to now sell these hot dogs to everyone, every enterprise customer. That might not be the case. Enterprise customers might want all the toppings, and they might want foie gras injected into the hot dog as well. But there's always a subset of buyers that are going to just want the hot dog. They don't want to overpay for all the toppings. They want the bare minimum. So slow down a little bit and find a tight 100 list of those companies. And then you can hit me up on LinkedIn and we can start to talk about how to clarify your message to give you the best chance of starting conversations with them and then lowering the barrier of entry for them to have a bite of your hot dog.
one thing I want to add, though, which is so important because this happens all the time. When you release the first version of something, you're inevitably going to get people writing you saying, I will buy this if you add this, that, and the other. And then if you start to chase, the tendency is to begin to chase because, oh, there's a sale there. There is no sale there. Those are just words.
Yeah.
And once you do X, Y, Z, they're going to go, well, I also want ABC. And before you know it, you're a consulting company trying to land a consulting gig with a custom version of something for one customer. Then you find out you've gone this so far in this direction when everyone else is comfortable with it over here. So you need to be careful that you don't get carried away in the early days of putting something out and chasing phantom sales.
I've worked for several companies where the sales team would sell things that were detached from the product we were building, and it was I've put a lot of effort into not doing that here, and we haven't. We've sold our services directly aligned with what our product is. The one part that I've struggled with this is my last question, sorry,
Sure.
is around backward compatibility. I feel like as we've one company, we built something for a subset of companies, customers, and then we wanted to launch a new product. And the new product didn't sunset the old product completely. It ended up with 2 engineering teams, and it was just a complicated mess. And I didn't want to switch into enterprise software sales quickly for us because I wanted to make sure we were comfortable with where our product was to build on top of it before launching it. So that was like a trade-off that I've been working through for 2 years, and we're on the 6th version. We're releasing the 6th version of it now. This is the one that we want to sell. And I know the temptation to add feature creep and to, we need 5 more features.
Yeah. I would say version 6 is, if you can't launch version 6 publicly, something else is wrong. That's a lot of versions. So I would say just
totally
go.
agree.
You're ready. You're ready. You were probably ready 3 versions ago.
Yeah, I agree.
And tap your inner network first before you reach out cold. There's
Yeah.
always going to be people in your network that are going to be close to somebody that is somebody you want to get in front of. That's going to be much easier than knocking on a stranger's door.
Cool.
All right,
Thank-
Bo.
Good luck, Bo.
Bye.
All right, we got, let's see. We got Matthew Cope. Matthew, how you doing? You're on with Jason and Josh.
Hi, Jason. Hi, Josh. How you guys
Hey.
doing?
Good.
Great library behind you, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. So my question is, if you wanted to go up market, I know that you said in the previous question that your business is not designed that way, but if you're going from smaller markets and a smaller vertical towards moving up market, towards enterprise and towards branching out to different verticals, what are some of the smarter moves that you can do in a business where you can get certain low-hanging fruit? I wanted to kind of get your insights on it.
I'm gonna, Jason, before you go down, first, Jason loves that term low-hanging fruit. I'm gonna let him riff on that in 2 seconds. But before we go there, why do you want to move up market?
So I work as a BDR with a company that is moving up market and wants to expand. They have a pretty strong hold in a tech market, mid-market level, but they want to start moving out and expanding into a larger market.
Why?
So part of it is that's where some of the competitors have gone and they're chasing them. And I'm kind of tasked to go along and kind of pursue that as well. So, and to help with that.
Okay. So Jason, this is a situation. So Jason might not be familiar with the term BDR. It stands for Business Development Rep. And they are tasked with starting new conversations with a list of people that they are given. So Matt is not in a position to change strategically if he's going up market or not up market. He is being told we need to go up market. And his question is, how do you go about doing that in a way that's the lowest hanging fruit or the easiest way? Jason, you want to start with low hanging fruit, or then I'll go?
Well, I want to actually just say, I wish I could help you, but I actually don't know anything about this. So I also don't want to be someone who's, because they're being asked, is going to make up answers. So I really don't know, because we haven't gone that way. I don't know anything about that approach. And I want to just stay in my lane here, so I don't give you information that's misleading. I wouldn't. Well, I know you've been told that this is what you're doing. I think, there's that famous book, Innovator's Dilemma, which is about how companies tend to go up market and seek in search of new business. It might be an interesting thing to read, even if you can't change the direction, just to have a sense of what happens. Because the pressure is going to come from below, actually. Competitors are going to come and fill the vacuum that you've left because you've gone up market. And just to know that, I think, is an interesting thing. So I would read Innovator's Dilemma. It's a relatively old book now. I don't know, 25 years old, maybe, or 30. I don't even know how old it is. Clayton Christensen. And it describes exactly what's happening at your company. And so anyway, I know you can't change it, but that would be a good thing just to have some background on as well. Just to see, there's case studies in there of how this tends to go and what tends to happen. And it just might be good information to have on top of what's actually about to happen. But as far as the rest of it, I wish I could help you, but I don't know anything about that.
I have quite a bit of experience in this area. And so I'll give you a couple of first things to think about. The first thing to think about is not to get product trained, but to get problem trained. So the audience that you were selling to down market, the people that you were selling to down market, they have a completely different job and circumstances and events than people up market. So what we have to do first is we've got to have conversations with people that are doing those jobs, not as a mechanism to get a sale, but to just to understand what specifically is the job they're trying to get done and how are they getting a job done today. And you've got to be able to see that very clearly in your head, like a mental movie. It can't be foggy like they're trying to optimize the supply chain. It's got to be like this. They're in the kitchen and they love to make tomato caprese salad for their family. And they make it 4 times a week because this guy loves making the salad. And as you can see, he's using a knife right now to make it. But the knife's a little dull It gets the job done, but as he's slicing the tomato, you can see that it splats all over his white apron. It's no big deal. He can throw it in the washing machine. One day he decides to go to the mall, look for a new knife, goes into Williams Sonoma, sees like a bunch of new knives. He's confused. There's so many. They're like $600 a piece. He's going to go back and just going to use his old knife because that's what he knows and he's already has it. He doesn't want to spend $700. See how you heard that? You saw that in your head? You're probably not seeing that right now of the people, quote unquote, upmarket. So how do you get there? My friend Charlotte Johnson, who works over at SalesLoft, did this. She merely reached out to people and was transparent. Hey, I'm a new BDR selling into this market. I know nothing about it. Can I chat with you sometime about how you're getting this job done and some of the things you're struggling with? And she came at that with pure intent. And she asked, I don't know, 25 or 30 people, and she had 10 to 12 conversations. Her name is Charlotte Johnson. If you want to hit her up on LinkedIn and know the exact email that she sent, some of those people ended up becoming customers. That was not her intent, but her idea there was, how do I get closer to the customer? I'm in a copywriting group with like 6 other people. What we never talk about is copywriting techniques. When Jason and I talk even about copywriting, it's always, how do we get closer to the customer? About like what they're thinking and feeling and what's driving them. So that's going to be step 1. I call it problem training, not product training. If you don't have that down, you're going to miss in your messaging. It's going to be very generic. It's going to be foggy. So once you get that clear, it becomes very easy to start to craft messages that are going to make people scratch their head and think, well, what is that? That sounds interesting. I want to learn more.
Great.
Second thing is, before you reach out to people cold, we talked about this with the last person that was on, there are people in your network, your VCs, the people in your company, everybody in your company, all of your friends' connections. On LinkedIn has a great feature. It's a phenomenal, it's probably my favorite feature on LinkedIn. Shows you that you have a connection to Jason Fried. Let's say Jason Fried's one of your customers that you think you might help. And you know me, Matt, and you see that I'm connected to Jason. It's possible that I know Jason and I kind of think what you're doing is interesting. It's going to be much easier for me to write an email to Jason. It's almost guaranteed that Jason's going to open up my email because he knows me. Well, he might not open it because he's sick of hearing from me, but you get my point here. Versus if you emailed him because he doesn't know you. In a cold email, you have the person writing the email, the subject line, and that first sentence. Normally, people can't do anything about that, who's writing the email, but you can actually, if you're smart, about reaching out to people that are connected and then asking them to make an introduction on your behalf. You give them the copy, then they make an introduction. Hey, Jason, I'd love for you to meet X, Y, and Z. Jason's done that to me a bunch of times. He's introduced me to people and vice versa. Does that help you at all, Matt?
Yeah, it's been great help. Thank you.
All right, man. We're going to do one more, and then we're going to go back here. We got a couple of repeats. Let me see if there's anybody else that doesn't have a repeat. All right, we'll go back to one repeat. We got Ben back on, and then we're going to wrap up for today. All right, Ben, come on back.
Ben's already come on. Let's go to Ben because Ben already asked another email.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks. Thanks. Have you solved all their problems yet? Are you making money? We've helped you that much and everything's fine? Is that what's going on? You're welcome.
Sorry. Thanks for taking it again. So Josh, I requested a follow. Jason, I requested a follow. I also realized, Jason, we share a lot of commonalities with your approach to building companies. I love that. But Jason, just to answer your question quickly, the value for the businesses is that they now have a new business segment that they untapped revenue that they never saw before. Second of all, they get data to be able to target, customers. Like say you're doing something on Valentine's Day. Next year's Valentine, you can keep those people coming back for something that you have to offer. And then third of all, there's a huge research that no matter how much, businesses think that long lines are good, it has a negative connotation in their mind and bad image kind of stuff. They'll stay, but eventually it attaches that negative stuff. So third fact is that, or third point is that it brings about a great customer service. If you just give them that option, it's not forced. There's a line you can wait if you want. However, we have this option, just like, dining in or delivery, where you can pay a little premium and get to there right away.
All right, so thanks. Let me
add something? One thing to think about for me is like, this is just my gut impression. I feel like too much emphasis is being put on the line. There's a lot of restaurants that are just booked. There's no line outside, but they're reserved, they're full. But it's, I want to get in. I need to get in. I got a special event tonight. I need to get in. Is there a way I can just pay extra to get in? Is there a subset of tables that are available to me where the bill is more, like there's a 10% premium and there's a $100, again, whatever, making up numbers, $100 fee to just get in there because I need to get into this place tonight. I got a client in town. I want to impress that, whatever it is. There's no line outside a fancy restaurant.
Yes.
Typically. People aren't waiting, but you know it's booked. You call,
Yeah.
can't get in. Is there a way I can get in? Is there any way I can get in? That is more, I like the jump the line name and I like the idea, but I would think that the line, it's like if a restaurant's like, I don't have a line, will they just not understand what you're offering?
Yeah, I want to pile on this as well. And I hear this a lot. People have, my product does 6 or 7 things. I skip the line, I do this customer. What happens is the message gets muddy when you go out like that because people can't focus on 7 ideas. I like this idea of what Jason's saying to make this very crisp, which is the average revenue price per table is higher, right? So one of the things that restaurant owners care about is they want to turn tables relatively quickly to be able to get more revenue per table. So if you went out with a message like that, if you were to make a cold call like that, and you were to say, hey, I've been speaking to a lot of restaurant owners and they're looking for ways to increase the average revenue price per table, given their limited capacity, was wondering if you guys are thinking about that. They might say, well, what do you mean increase? Well, we have a way in which people can pay extra to be able to get preferential seating, and that revenue goes to the restaurant. Rather than we help you cut the line, we help you customer service, like that's a very sort of crisp message. And I think the restaurant owner is going to care about that more than the consumer skipping a line.
And I think the person who's going to take you up on that, let's say you have a client in town and you want to impress them and you want to take them to this really nice restaurant and it's going to cost you 10% more. You're like, I don't care. I'm happy to pay 10% more to get into this place because the whole experience is worth so much more than that to me. But the restaurant, like restaurants work on pretty tight margins. If they can get 10% more from a table, probably a table is going to spend a lot of money. They'll probably really like that. So,
and I would make this even simple, Banks. I learned this from Jason. Like if I was you, I would call the restaurant tomorrow. Find a customer that wants to eat at that restaurant. Maybe it's you actually.
Yeah,
Find a restaurant that you like and call the restaurant and say, hey, I'd like to talk to the owner. I'm having a special occasion with my wife and I or significant other. We'd really like to eat at your restaurant. Would the owner be open to taking an extra 25% on top of whatever we charge for us to be able to get seated in a sooner fashion?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
by the way, restaurant owner, I've got 8 more people like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Be that first customer essentially.
Wow.
And see who's willing to take that. Go, I got to get in at 6 tomorrow. It's our anniversary. I mean, you don't want to lie, whatever it is, just a special event, whatever. And I need to get into your place. Is there any chance? I'm willing and I'm happy to pay 20% more on top of my bill. You could split it with this with the help. You can take it yourself, whatever you want. But I need to get in there. Is there any way? And just be that person.
It reminds me, Jason, of, do you ever, my grandpa used to do this when we used to go to those fancy steak restaurants. He'd like slip the guy like a
5 and his
Y'all nailed it on the head. Josh, I loved what you said. I didn't take the notes, so I hope I'm able to get that from you again via LinkedIn.
Email me anytime. Guys, thank you so much, Jason. Thanks for being so generous with your time, Jason. We should do this again.
Likewise, anytime. We'll do it weekly.
Take care, guys.